So I'm Jayden Murphy. I'm the GPSN National Chair for 2017. I'm a final year medical student at University of Wollongong.
I was born in
Oh.
Wollongong. Okay. All right. What do you want to tell me? Just tell me what you want to tell me.
So basically, as we know, there's a lot of structural changes within GPRA, particularly at the moment. From GPSN's perspective, I hope that we can collaborate to work towards streamlining exactly what we want from the structural changes that are happening. So particularly for GPSN itself, we represent every medical school in Australia. All our members come from that base, which is 21 medical schools. And usually we have about a 95% sign-up rate for each first-year medical student. Now that's a lot of members, and the way we engage with them is local events. Now, it's feeding up to a national executive, our idea is to make sure that all these events run smoothly and that they've got the resources to do so. So we engage members to basically show that general practice is a good career choice, it's a viable career choice, and there's a lot more than what they think of just sitting in office. It's so that GP and primary care is on the forefront of medical students' minds from day one, moving through their careers, which moves into GPRA, which is where the registrars get involved. Now, before they become registrars, they're medical students and moving on through this process, as we know, as training programs. So I feel that GPSN's role within GPRA is to foster this care, foster the, I suppose, excitement about GP and the role it has within Australia's healthcare system, and understanding the diverse relationships that GPs have with wherever they work. So I feel that with these changes that we can help streamline the member bases based on where they're coming from, whether registrar level or student level. So we get the most out of that, members get the most out of their membership, be it conferences or be it local events at the university, that we're getting the most to our members so they're understanding exactly what general practice is at the moment in Australia. So with those changes, like I said, I think that best hoping we streamline things so we're focusing on members rather than internal policies.
What might be, so if we move in the right direction, what might be some of the first things GPRA could actually do that might be helpful?
So if everything was working in the right direction, it would, I suppose, running a well-balanced, I suppose, FGP. So something where a student stream was actually held by students, run by students in a way that actually attracted students to attend. And same with registrars. I know it is mostly ran by registrars, but at a level that we can all collaborate together, all our members are enticed to come because they're going to get something out of it. If not at something as big as a conference, something where you can get up-to-date relative information on where you are within your training. So we've got registrars, GPRA advocates for registrars. We know that, and GPSN does its best to advocate for its students, but there's always forever all these changes. So I suppose lobbying so that not just our changes are heard at government level, but we can also feed back to our members so they know exactly what's happening.
Should we co-lobby?
Now that's interesting perspective because we are in the end working towards a same goal as GP, but co-lobbying might be difficult in the fact that students have a very different perspective on healthcare as registrars do, and by the time they get to registrar training, it's all going to be very different as well. So co-lobbying is good in theory. I just don't know how practical it will be, being the fact that students will be going into junior doctor soon. They don't, what the registrar level things may affect them. Be good to get ideas about it, but I don't think actual lobbying, because they're not going to fully understand the training program to date.
So do you think your members do want active lobbying on their behalf?
Not so much active lobbying to, say, change structures of healthcare, but of course anyone in health wants active lobbying for general healthcare. But in terms of active lobbying to government, I think what we would want as a student level is active lobbying or even as advertisement about events and things that we do as a student network ourselves. So I know it's very different to lobbying for policy changes and things like that. That's not as a bigger issue for students at the moment. It's something we really don't understand because they're not working. We don't understand how the policies affect us that much. But in terms of what we do day to day is running events to entice people into general practice, but also promote a healthy Australia generally. So help lobbying to initiatives and things like that that we run and we organise so that we can actually do it effectively. So such things would be like a community health working group we've got, which promotes Get a GP for medical students, or which hopefully roll out to Get a GP for anyone in health, that advocating to actually self-care, that having your own GP no matter where you are is very important, and that's something that we try and focus on. But from a national perspective, it would be easier done if it was a recognised kind of at a government level as well.
I accept what you're saying about different interests from students and registrars and everything, but do you think there might be enough common ground to identify issues to jointly take?
Oh, for sure. I still advocate that. I said in theory it does work and it will work in some ways, but I think active lobbying or I think collaborative lobbying is a good idea, that at least that GPSN and GPRA agree before lobbying. That makes perfect sense. But in terms of, yeah, there will be common grounds because it will end up at registrar and GP at the end. I do agree, yeah, active lobbying would be beneficial for both parties, but I don't think GPSN as an entity lobbying by itself for the same thing. I think if it was lobbying at GPRA's level, it would be lobbying as GPRA, but also with the interest of GPSN in mind. Yeah.
So at least has a joint dialogue.
Yeah, that's what I mean. Because I mean, GPRA encompasses GPSN, so I feel that as a company, it should represent all its members when it's making an active statement of lobbying, which involves GPSN. So I feel that anything that's actively presented to government or whatever stakeholders should also be within the values of GPSN itself, because we are, in the end, members of them as well. So if they're representing their members adequately, that will involve representing GPSN members as well.
So there should be some agreement or sign off or whatever on the corporate position.
Yeah, at least informed so that we understand what's going on from that level as well.
I won't ask you to give me a description of what you think of the organisation as it is, but what I will ask you to do is give me a description of what you think it would be like in 12 months if you were satisfied it improved significantly.
Day to day, I think it would be I will keep going to the same word because that's a word that I really am working towards, a streamlined organisation from both ends. That GPSN, for example, when we have a local event, it gets reported through us and we know what's going on, and then GPRA are updated in a biannual report, and that way they know the forthcomings of what's happening in GPRA. There's an open dialogue between the board and our national exec, and that way when they're lobbying they know what's happening from our level as well, so they can have the interest of, oh, by the way, this is also happening when they're talking to an MP. It might be a side project, but it's something that's still happening, so that basically GPRA and GPSN has a streamlined open communication that we all are on the same page no matter what's happening. And so that way in 12 months I think a collaborative company which encompasses all the GPSN with part of all the GPRA, which intensely that's what it is.
Okay, so just mentally picturing the ideal situation, what percentage would you give us now for how far we are to a really effective working relationship?
So I will go off, at the moment I can't really comment on right this second because it's been quite open because we've been collaborating for this particular, I'm talking end of last year. So I was vice chair last year, and I would say I didn't know half the board. I knew 2 members. I only met the CEO once. I met the chair a couple times, but only briefly. And my dealings was purely through an office level, which was micromanaged, as far as I know, to a fact that we had no idea what the board was doing, the board had no idea what we were doing. That means that when we had great ideas, we could only talk about it when we had, like FGP. We were lobbying everything we were doing in one sitting because That's the only time we actually sit down and talk to them. That's the only time they could talk to us, because other than that, nothing was communicated. Everyone who dealt with this directly knew that working groups existed day to day, and that's what they were doing. But when the board didn't really know what was going on, because they would be like, "Oh, what's happening with the working group these days?" But that's something we report on in every meeting, and we had GPRA staff attend meetings, so by all means they knew what was going on.
Got about 2.5 minutes left. I mean, did you want to put another card in, or?
Let's see how we go. What else do you want to say?
I think I've got all my key issues out. I think one. Yep.
Yeah.
So I suppose one last thing which involves that, which is something we will talk about throughout the weekend, is apart from the open collaboration and stuff like that, it's and back to streamlining. It's I suppose acknowledging the role that GPSN has within GPRA. That I don't know how many members GPRA has, but I know we can accurately boast 90% of GPSN, 90% of students within medical school are GPSN members,
We did.
No, I've got 2 minutes.
Keep going.
which makes up a significant portion of GPRA's membership. So whenever we do talk about, like I said, lobbying and whatnot, that everything should be done within mindset that it collaborates with GPSN's interests as well.
Brilliant. I think just one last question, because what you had to say there's quite useful and informative. After tomorrow, what sort of outcome would make you feel pretty good?
I suppose from GPSN's perspective and my perspective, it would be that we're all comfortable to talk to each other and keep each other on the same page. That's probably the main part. Yeah, that when something happens in the board, that they know that they're comfortable with contacting myself and my national exec to pass on to our members, which are their members anyway, and that when we have a great idea, we feel comfortable with talking to the board about it.
Brilliant.
Cool. All right.
We're close.